and instead of having the one Venturi opening on the side, put two of them in the top. Yeah, if one's good, two's better, right, America? So growing up, I love all the most ridiculous cars through history. The oddities, the beautiful ones, the fast ones, the crazy ones, you know, all those, you know, wild tales, the cars that have nearly become mythology. That's what's fun. That's the best adventure, right? So there was a car that I fell in love with as a kid. You know, it was something that they made a lot of slot cars of in the 60s, Hot Wheels, things like that. It was really nearly mythological. They only made like 15 to 20 of these things. And that was the Bill Thomas Cheetah. It was a car that was devised at the same time as the Shelby Cobras had just come out. Well, Carroll Shelby decided, let's take an AC Ace, this little British car. Oh, it's got a giant engine bay. Well, we'll just stick a V8 in it and make it not break. There, you got the Cobra. That's it. That's all the magic of the Cobra. That's the magic. That's where it all came from. Hey, we can stick a bigger engine in this. Okay, let's do it. That's it. But anyway, so the Chevy guys decided, hey, this is not going to work for us with Ford winning a lot, right? So they decided we're going to make a better car. Now, the thing about Ford Cobras are they're street legal. It's a street legal drivable car. AC is producing a lot of these things. It's easy to put V8 engines and build a lot of them. Now, of course, there's not that many Cobras, but by race car standards, there's a lot of them. So Bill Thomas decided, I'm going to build a Cheetah. And we're going to make it lighter, shorter, and completely more ridiculous across the board. And we're going to build just enough of them to make them street legal so that we can race it in the same class and beat the crap out of Cobras. So that's a great plan and all. And it would have worked, but their shop burned down. And I've heard loads of different numbers ranging from like 15 to 25 of how many they made. And of course, people have made replicas and still do, and things change. So Cheetah Geeks, you don't need to write me, but if you want to comment about that, feel free. But the Bill Thomas Cheetah was so neat. So obviously Chevy V8 powered, the 327 small block, revs higher, can make some great power. And Bill Thomas took the Rochester mechanical fuel injection that had existed on Corvettes and some other things, called as a Fuelie. And what he did is he took it, and instead of having the one Venturi opening on the side, put two of them in the top. Yeah, if one's good, two's better, right, America? So you got the V8 in the middle. So they're building this spindly tube frame chassis, almost in some ways like a Maserati birdcage, but, you know, American. So it's very lightweight chassis, very short wheelbase. And what was interesting, it's technically a mid-engine car, even though the engine's in the front, because the engine is between the front and rear axle line, or within the wheelbase. So then you got your typical 4-speed, you know, Muncie transmission in there. But what's cool is, you know, it had the Corvette rear differential that would give independent rear suspension, but the differential was so close to the transmission that there was no drive shaft. It was literally just a coupler to couple the output shaft of the transmission directly to the differential. So as a driver, if I'm sitting in this thing, the differential is right here, right by your pelvis, right behind you, with the half shaft going right behind the seat. Hopefully you got a drive shaft loop, so if it breaks, it doesn't, you know, like beat you to death, literally. And the transmission's right here, and of course the shift lever goes forward because you're on top of the transmission and shifting like this. But the craziness about the Cheetah, and where the mythology comes, of course, is that there was flex to the chassis because it was spindly and whatnot. And, you know, of course, maybe they didn't develop it so well, but that was back in the day of bias ply tires, so everything was sliding around anyway. And the aerodynamics were kind of wonkus because, you know, you have that really short, cool hood. It just looks like a, you know, like a cat that's going to pounce. And you get the cockpit way on the back with gull-wing doors, which is really fun getting in and out because there's nothing that holds them open in a race car. So you got to come up with this really clever way to stick your foot in and get all sideways while you got a door leaning on you and getting in and try to look cool, which is hard to do, but it's a great car. So who really cares if you look like a dork? But anyway, so you get the steering wheel like right here and a shifter, and you get the transmission and the differential, and you hope nothing explodes. Where are you going to put your feet? You got an engine right here, so they're off to the side a little bit, but the engine's right there, right by your feet. So where the header's going to go. So they come dead straight out of the Chevy, a long way, the tube's coming straight out, and then bend a 90-degree angle to go around your foot box and out. So what you've effectively done is made an aluminum oven to stick your feet in the whole time. Okay? You know, insulation, give me a break. You know, the radiator heat will go over it. So, you know, that's all well and fun from the 60s. But so, you know, I get this car, I'm fixing it up, And I got it in my shop, and it even ended up putting in a different engine to go racing in it, and went all through it. The gearbox was leaking, it had issues and such, but I drove it, and I had a title, so of course I'm going to drive it on the street. And at the time I lived in Columbus, in the Dublin area, which is northwest Columbus. And then the fun place to go would be Easton Town Center, the mall. And Cars and Coffee guys and everything would go out there. So an old Cheetah, the most ridiculous racing car from the 60s, that's just like wrong in every way, which is what makes it right. It's like algebra racing. Everything is so wrong, it's kind of right. So just hauling on this thing, just going to the mall, no big deal. And when we had the other motor in it, it had Weber carburetors on it. And it was really cool because the Weber carburetors, they're just right there. You're just looking at them through the hood, right there, coming out of the hood, right through the windshield. And at full throttle, it was neat because you could see, I'd never seen this happen before, but you could actually see like the pulsing of the vapor coming out of each stack. Because of the overlap in the camshaft and the duration, it would be like pulse, 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 pulse. It would kind of look like when you see the afterburner of a jet fighter going to take off and the thrust goes supersonic and it creates those funky little star effects. But obviously a different thing going on. But it was really neat to see and completely ridiculous. You got a giant American V8 right there over your feet with the headers wrapping around your body and all, and a differential and a transmission right here and a short wheelbase that wants to go sideways and a big engine like that, so it's awesome. Anyway, so drove it on the street, hooliganized, probably annoyed some people I knew that had their new Lamborghinis. It's not probably, I totally did that on purpose. But it was fun. And I did take it to one race at Mid-Ohio. And a really great car, a lot of fun to have, but not necessarily the kind of race car you're going to want to race forever and ever and ever. There's a few people that still vintage race them, and my hat's off to them. It's a beautiful car. It's a lot of fun to watch. But so take it to Mid-Ohio, get it all set up, get it to race, and there was a few things kind of off. You know, at the time, I didn't have loads of funds just to throw at something. So it was running a little hot, but we did the best we can to make it a little better at the track with regard to what we had. Because I was also looking after a client's car at the time, and somebody that worked with me also had a new race car too, so I was helping them out. But I really enjoyed racing it, and it wasn't set up all that great. I kind of had period correct shocks, so they weren't super dialed in, and didn't have sway bars, so I couldn't really dial that in either. And the brakes were so-so. They were disc brakes from, a 65, 67 Corvette, so they were pretty good. And I was having a great little battle with a Lotus 23. And just so much fun, and it got through the race well and stayed cooling. But what was crazy about the Cheetah is when you'd come around the carousel at Mid-Ohio, or the keyhole, which is going to be a 180-degree, long right turn, you could be on the throttle with this thing, with the short wheelbase, and just take a set with the steering wheel. And I'm not talking like breathe, like you're on here's full throttle, there's medium, there's off. I'm not talking about like whale off the throttle like some people do. They're all light switchy, like they're driving a silly go-kart or something. Like you could just be on the throttle, like right at the amount of grip, and it'd be pushing out a little bit. And if I swear I just let pressure off of the throttle a little bit, the thing would just be like, okay, pressure and turn in and steer and go. I didn't even have to like turn the steering wheel at some point. I could just steer it like this. You just get right on the limit. Maybe just kind of go like this. Now, don't get me wrong. It required a lot of paying attention to drive. I think a lot of drivers that kind of suck like to call, oh, that car's a handful. Oh, that car's a monster. It's a handful. It's not a handful. You didn't set it up right, or you're a terrible driver, okay? It's one of those two things. Any car, I don't care what, if you actually set it up right, it's an okay car. Maybe not the best car, but it's okay. So the Cheetah was kind of fun like that, kind of odd, and mine, I'm sure, was not set up the best at that time. But had a great dice, had a great race with it. And the other fun oddity I learned was with the headers going over the aluminum footbox with very little insulation or none. I like to be real period correct at the time, so my fire suit looked like the Dunlop suits that were typical to the 60s of Formula One drivers, even into the 70s. In the beginning of the movie Rush, you see James Hunt like walk into that hospital with his like driver suit tied around his waist, like bare-chested. It looked a lot like that driver suit. Anyway, I had that, and I had black leather driving shoes that I had for a long, long time. And I think they had some Nomex, and I'm going to say be fireproof, but it was just normal leather on the outside, not suede. And when I was driving, it was just blisteringly hot in the footbox of this thing, because you get the headers right there. It's an oven. You're sticking your feet in an oven, okay? So, and you really dance this thing. I'm like, this is, first of all, it's uncomfortable because it's hot, okay? But the next thing I noticed is I'm like, and I'm racing. I'm like, this is starting to get tight. What I didn't realize, it was getting so hot, the leather on my shoes was starting to shrink. And it was actually squeezing my feet. Okay, so these crazy myths you hear from way back when of like fighter pilots and race car drivers and everything like that. Sometimes when you want to call BS, think about it, because it might not be a BS story. It might actually have been hot enough that it shrank the person's shoes and started getting tight. But the race went fine, and it was great fun. I ended up selling the car. I was doing my own business at the time, so needed the funds for that, couldn't be car collecting, and ended up selling it to a man who used to be an F-4 Phantom fighter pilot. And that seems appropriate. Something as wild and woolly and exciting as a cheetah certainly should be owned by a guy who knew what going supersonic over the deck over Vietnam was like in an F-4 with a full afterburner. So anyway, guys, that's my story for this time. I hope you subscribe, and I'll catch you next time around.